What happens when a group of elite alien cadets trained in zero gravity and convinced humans are weak arrive on Earth and face something they never prepared for? Gravity. They mocked it, until one light hike nearly broke them. This is a story about strength, pride, and the raw power of human endurance. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show a thumbs up by liking the video. It helps more than you know. Now, let's jump into the story. Sergeant Nolan Bryce stood near the edge of the hangar, hands in his pockets, his boots planted firmly on the polished floor of Earth Space Command. The silence was heavy, only broken by the faint hum of engines as the large transport ship slowly descended. The massive vessel, shaped like a stretched teardrop, released steam as it settled down. Nolan squinted as the landing lights blinked off. This was not the first time he had welcomed visitors from another planet, but this group was different. They were cadets from Zelfur, a low-gravity world where strength was measured in speed, not endurance. The ship's side door opened with a hiss. A ramp extended, and one by one, 12 Zelfarian cadets stepped onto Earth's surface. They were tall, thin-limbed, and shimmered slightly under the hangar lights. Their skin was a soft lavender color that shifted depending on how the light hit it. Most had 4 arms and moved with an odd grace, more like dancers than soldiers. But the moment their feet touched the floor, the grace vanished. Their movements became slow and unsteady, as if they were trying to walk underwater. Nolan approached with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Earth. I'm Sergeant Nolan Bryce, your guide for this exchange program." The lead cadet, clearly older and more decorated than the rest, took a step forward. His name tag read Thren. His voice came through a translator clipped to his collar. "Your planet's pull is uncomfortable," he said, straining to stay upright. "We were not prepared for this level of gravity." "That's normal," Nolan replied calmly. "You'll get used to it. It's part of the experience." Another cadet, a shorter one with large eyes and a constantly twitching tail, let out a sound like clicking pebbles. "How do your people live like this? My knees feel like they're being crushed." His translator voice had a dramatic flair. Nolan chuckled. "Strong legs, strong hearts." A female cadet, Mara, rubbed her arms and muttered, "We were told Earth was a primitive world. This feels more like a punishment." Nolan said nothing, choosing to walk slowly in front of him toward the transport vehicle, waiting to take them to the surface. As he moved, he could hear the quiet groans and muffled complaints behind him. The Zelfarians were trying to hide their discomfort, but every few steps, someone stumbled or paused to catch their breath. "Just half a mile to the shuttle," Nolan said over his shoulder. "That's all?" Another cadet gasped. "It feels like 20. By the time they reached the transport, most of the aliens were drenched in sweat and gasping for air. They fell into their seats like wet laundry tossed on a chair. Nolan helped strap them in with quiet patience. Once the doors closed and the shuttle lifted into the sky, he finally glanced at his digital pad and smiled to himself. Everything was going according to plan. The descent to the Earth Academy base in Colorado was smooth, but the increased gravity didn't do the Zelfarians any favors. Upon landing, several of them had trouble standing up. One nearly toppled forward before grabbing onto a seat for support. "Your quarters are this way," Nolan said, leading the way once more. The group followed him, staggering like children. "Learning how to walk. This is torture," muttered Solve, the youngest of the group. "Your planet is built to break visitors." Nolan glanced back and shrugged. "We were born in it. Gravity doesn't seem so heavy when it's all you've ever known." At last, the cadets arrived at their rooms. They collapsed onto beds clearly designed with their extra limbs in mind. Most didn't even change out of their uniforms. Nolan stood in the doorway, still calm and unreadable. "Rest well. Tomorrow morning, We begin with a light hike. Several of the aliens perked up. A hike? Thread asked. As in walking? Nolan nodded. Just a few miles through the mountains. Nothing hard. The aliens began to laugh, their clicking voices overlapping like a pile of dominoes falling. Walking? That's your big challenge? Mara said between laughs. We train in zero gravity. Obstacle fields. Nolan's smile returned, but his voice was even. Good to hear. Still, bring water and wear good shoes. Earth terrain is a little different from what you're used to. The laughter continued even after he left. Nolan made his way back to his room and began packing his trail gear. A 5-mile trail, 2,000 feet up in elevation, over uneven, rocky ground. For a trained Earth soldier, it was just a warm-up. For beings from a planet with less than half of Earth's gravity, it was going to feel like dragging a mountain on their backs. He added an extra water filter and an emergency beacon to his pack, just in case. The cadets were proud, and pride could lead to mistakes, but Nolan wasn't worried. Tomorrow would be hard for them, but it would also be unforgettable. They had come here thinking Earth was weak. Tomorrow, they'd learn the truth. He zipped his pack shut and looked out the window. The mountains stood tall in the fading light, calm and quiet, like they were waiting for the challenge too. This was just the beginning. Asterisk, the sun had just begun to rise over the Colorado mountains when Sergeant Nolan Bryce stood outside the alien cadets' quarters, arms crossed and coffee in hand. He could already hear movement inside, faint groans, clumsy thuds, and muffled conversations in Zephyrian clicking tones. The previous day had been hard on them, and Nolan knew today would be harder. The light hike was about to begin. When the door opened, Cadet Thren stepped out first. He was trying his best to look alert and strong, but the dark circles under his eyes gave him away. Behind him, Mara dragged her feet, her usually neat uniform wrinkled and slightly askew. Saul followed last, still yawning, his face pale and unimpressed with the gravity that had clearly ruined his night's sleep. Good morning, Nolan said with a chipper tone that sounded just a little too happy. Sleep well? Your beds feel like iron slabs, Saul mumbled. My spine may never forgive me. You'll adjust, Nolan said, handing each cadet a hiking pack. Here's your gear for the trail. Water, food, first aid, emergency. Transponder, only the essentials. Thren grunted as he took the pack. This feels heavier than I expected. Is there a small creature in here? Just 20 pounds, Nolan replied. Which feels like 50 on your world, I suppose. That's Earth math for you. As the other cadets lifted their packs, the grumbling began. One nearly fell over. Another asked if essentials on Earth included rocks. Mara, breathing heavily already, asked, Is this trail really as easy as you said yesterday? 4 humans. Sure, Nolan said, starting down the gravel path that led from the academy. But for you, let's find out. The first part of the hike was simple enough. The path wound through a forest of tall pine trees, the early morning light flickering through the leaves. Birds chirped. A cool breeze moved through the air. But the beauty of the scene was lost on the Zephyrians. Even on level ground, they struggled. Their legs trembled, their backs bent slightly under the weight of their packs, and their breathing became shallow within the first 15 minutes. Cadet Brell, the largest of the group, moved at a snail's pace. His limbs shook with each step. We trained in orbital free fall for months. This is worse. My body feels like it's being hugged by a planet. You're doing fine, Nolan said without turning around. Keep your steps small. Don't fight gravity, work with it. Mara muttered. Gravity doesn't want a partnership. It wants a sacrifice. The flat path didn't last long. Soon, they reached the base of Storm Ridge Trail, a steep dirt path scattered with rocks, tree roots, and switchbacks that twisted. Their way up the mountainside. Nolan stopped and pointed upward. From here, it's about 5 miles to Skyrise Bluff. Elevation gain is just under 2,000 feet. You'll be fine. The cadets stared up at the trail in horror. On their homeworld, climbing was easy. Gravity barely held them down. Here, each step uphill felt like lifting a stone column. Thren tried to sound confident. "We faced worse in combat training." "Maybe," Nolan replied, raising an eyebrow. "But this trail doesn't shoot back. It just waits and pulls." They began the climb. The first mile uphill was slow, but manageable. Thren led the group, trying to set the pace. Mara clutched a walking stick she had found, leaning on it like a cane. Solve spent more time looking at the ground than the path ahead. Nolan walked ahead of them all, his steps steady, his breathing calm, making it look easy. After an hour, the trail steepened. The pine trees gave way to sharp rocks and narrow edges. The air grew thinner. Brel had to stop every few steps to rest. Mara's hands were scraped from catching herself after tripping. Solve had stopped joking altogether, which was the most worrying sign of all. "How far now?" Thren asked between gasps. "Just a couple of miles more," Nolan replied. "You're doing great." "You lied about this being a light hike," Mara wheezed. "I said it was light for Earth standards," Nolan said with a smile. Another hour passed. The group was now completely silent, their energy spent on simply staying upright. Their pace slowed to a crawl. Some of them began using all 4 limbs, crawling when they had to, gripping roots and rocks like mountaineers. And yet, something changed. When Solve slipped on a loose stone, Mara reached out and grabbed his arm before he could fall. When Brel couldn't lift his pack, Thren took some of the heavier supplies and carried them without complaint. They began talking again, not in frustration, but in support. "Step here," one would say. "Watch that slope." Their teamwork became natural, not forced. Nolan noticed, but said nothing. He simply nodded to himself and kept leading. By the 3rd mile, the alien cadets were soaked in sweat. Their eyes drooped with exhaustion, but none of them quit. They no longer cared about proving how much stronger they were than humans. They just wanted to make it to the top, one step at a time. When the trail finally leveled out near the top, Nolan turned to face them. "You're almost there. Just past those rocks is Skyrise Bluff." No one answered. They just kept moving forward. They had come to Earth thinking they would conquer its challenges with ease. But now, with shaking limbs and aching bodies, they began to understand something they never expected. Earth's strength didn't come from technology or speed. It came from endurance. From standing tall, even when the weight of the world pressed down on every inch of you. And the trail wasn't finished yet. The path finally leveled out, and just beyond a jagged row of stones, the wide open ledge of Skyrise Bluff stretched out like a reward that had to be earned. The alien cadets, drenched in sweat and shaking from the long uphill battle, stumbled toward it, one by one. Thren was the first to collapse onto the flat stone ground, his chest rising and falling in quick, uneven breaths. Mara followed, sinking to her knees with a low groan, her limbs barely responding anymore. Solve simply flopped down like a sack of sand, face up and eyes closed, too tired to even speak. Nolan Bryce stood nearby, hands resting on his hiking poles, not even breathing hard. He watched the cadets with a quiet kind of pride. They had made it. Not fast, not clean, but they had climbed nearly 5 miles uphill under Earth's heavy gravity, carrying packs that had nearly flattened them on day 1. Nolan took a slow sip from his water bottle, then walked over and placed a full bottle next to each cadet. "Drink," he said simply. "Your muscles need it." The Zelfarians didn't argue. They drank in silence, the cool water reviving them just enough to sit up and look around. And that's when they saw it. The valley below stretched out like a painting. Rolling forests, thin silver rivers. Distant hills that shimmered under the mid-morning sun. A hawk soared above, its wings spread wide, circling lazily through the sky. Mara blinked slowly. "We don't have anything like this on Zelfur," she said. "We don't even have hills. Just smooth plains and floating towers." "It's beautiful," Thren admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. "But I still don't understand how you do this for fun." Nolan sat down on a nearby rock. "Humans have been hiking these mountains for centuries. It's part of who we are. Earth's gravity never lets us forget our limits, but pushing past those limits is how we grow stronger." Solve let out a weak laugh. "On Zelfur, fun is flying through low-orbit obstacle rings. This feels more like punishment." "Maybe," Nolan replied. "But this mountain taught you something no textbook ever could." The cadets sat quietly, watching the clouds move across the sky. Their bodies were sore, but their minds had shifted. They hadn't believed humans could be strong. Not really. In their academy, humans were always described as slow, dense, limited by their thick bones, and heavy environment. But today had changed that. Brell, who had barely spoken the whole way up, finally broke his silence. "Sergeant Bryce, you didn't even struggle. Not once." "How?" Nolan smiled. "I've lived here my whole life. My muscles, my bones, everything about me was shaped by this world. I've climbed this trail since I was younger than you. It's nothing special to me." Mara looked down at her arms, which trembled slightly as she lifted them. "This hike nearly broke us." "It was never about breaking you," Nolan said. "It was about showing you what Earth expects from its people, and what you're capable of when you stop resisting gravity and start working with it." The group sat in silence again. Then a sudden sound broke the stillness light, fast footsteps from below. The cadets turned just in time to see a group of human children, maybe 8 or 9 years old, run up the final section of the trail, laughing and shouting as they went. Their teacher followed a few paces behind, holding a tablet and calling out for them to stay close. One girl waved as she passed the tired Zelfarians. "Hi," she chirped, barely slowing down. The cadets stared in disbelief as the children vanished. Over the ridge behind them. Were those younglings? Thren asked, eyes wide. "Yes," Nolan said, standing up and stretching his back. "Elementary school field trip. They come up here every spring." Brell shook his head. "They ran up the path we almost crawled." "They've been hiking since they could walk," Nolan said. "This isn't special to them. It's normal." The aliens were quiet. Their pride had taken a hit, but it wasn't shame that filled the silence. It was realization. They weren't weak. They had trained hard, but they had never understood just how much Earth shaped its people. The strength wasn't just in the muscles. It was in the daily resistance, the constant challenge. Earth made you strong because it gave you no choice. After a long rest, Nolan stood and motioned for them to gather around. "Come on, before we head down, there's one more thing to see." He led them to the edge of Skyrise Bluff. The drop was steep, hundreds of feet straight down, but the view was incredible. Mountains stretched out in every direction. It felt like standing at the top of the world. "This," Nolan said, pointing across the valley, "is why we hike. Not just for training, for perspective." The cadets looked out in silence. For once, none of them had anything sarcastic to say. The view made everything they had just endured feel smaller somehow. "Worth it. We still have to go back down." "Don't we?" Solve asked, groaning. "Of course," Nolan said. "Different muscles. Same gravity." As they prepared to leave, something was different. They no longer walked like strangers on a hostile planet. They walked like a team. One that had been through something hard together, and come out the other side changed. Earth hadn't crushed them. It had reshaped them. One step at a time. Asterisk. 2 weeks after the hike to Skyrise Bluff, the Zelfarian cadets were no longer the same group who had stumbled off the shuttle with wobbly knees and doubtful eyes. Their movements, though still slower than human standards, were more stable now. They walked with confidence, carried their gear without complaint, and didn't gasp for air after climbing stairs. Earth's gravity had shaped them in ways they hadn't imagined. Sergeant Nolan Bryce observed their progress with quiet satisfaction. He had seen this transformation before, but never with alien cadets. These 12 had been skeptical, even dismissive. Now they showed something else. Respect. Inside the academy gym, the cadets were finishing their morning exercises. Thren was sweating but focused as he completed his last round of squats. Rel had finally managed a full set of push-ups without stopping. Even Mara, who once groaned at the sight of a staircase, now challenged herself to beat her own time on the treadmill. Solve had become the group's unexpected motivator, offering encouragement and the occasional joke to keep spirits up. Nolan had noticed a shift, not just physically, but mentally. The cadets were no longer just trying to survive. They were pushing themselves to improve. That afternoon, the air around the academy buzzed with anticipation. A visiting delegation from Zelfar's High Command was due to arrive. The cadets tidied their quarters, adjusted their uniforms, and reviewed everything they had learned over the past few weeks. They didn't say it out loud, but all of them felt the same quiet pressure. They wanted their superiors to see how far they had come. The transport ship landed just after noon. From it stepped Overseer Dalan, a tall figure wrapped in deep blue robes that shimmered faintly. His expression was calm, but his sharp eyes missed nothing. He was joined by General Morella, a respected Earth officer who had overseen the exchange program from the start. Nolan greeted them both at the landing pad and led them to the observation deck above the gym. From the viewing window, they watched the cadets assemble below. The alien visitors looked noticeably different from when they had first arrived, stronger, more grounded. Dylan raised an eyebrow. "They move like people who understand weight," he remarked. "They've earned it," Nolan replied. Demonstration began. The cadets moved through a series of basic training drills, stretches, strength exercises, and obstacle navigation. Each movement was more fluid, more stable. When Mara pulled herself up on the training bar, something she had failed to do even halfway during her first week, Dylan leaned slightly forward. He didn't speak, but the subtle shift of his brow spoke volumes. After the exercises ended, the cadets stood at attention. Dylan and General Mirella entered the gym floor. The Zelfarian overseer walked slowly among the cadets, observing them up close. He stopped in front of Thren. "You were top of your class back home," Elon said. "Are you still proud of that?" "Yes, Overseer," Thren replied, standing tall. "And what have you learned on Earth that you could not have learned on Zelfar?" Thren took a moment before answering. "That strength isn't only about speed or precision. It's also about pressure, about lasting through discomfort. Endurance is a different kind of power, one we never had to understand until now." Vylan studied him. Then he looked around at the other cadets. "It seems Earth has been a good teacher." Later that evening, the cadets gathered outside under the fading light. The mountains that had once looked threatening now felt familiar. Thren, Mara, Solve, and the others sat on the benches near the training field, talking quietly. Nolan joined them, carrying a small bag of Earth snacks that had become surprisingly popular with the group. "You all did well today," he said, passing around the bag. "Your overseer looked impressed." "He didn't smile," Solve pointed out. "He doesn't smile much," Nolan replied with a grin. Mara leaned back and looked at the stars beginning to appear overhead. "What happens when we go home?" she asked. "Will we lose this strength?" "Some of it," Nolan said, "but not all. Your muscles will change back, yes. But the discipline, the understanding that stays with you." Rel nodded. "We'll never see humans the same way again." Solve tilted his head. "Do you think human cadets will visit Zelpher?" "They're already preparing," Nolan said. "You'll be their instructors." That brought a round of laughter. "Oh, they're going to bounce all over the place," Mara said, imagining it. "We should build a course with floating pillars. Call it Earthling Bounce Challenge." Solve added, "We'll tell them it's just a light jog through the air." Thren smiled. "Let them learn what we did. That gravity, any gravity, is not a weakness. It's a teacher." Months later, a new shuttle landed on Zelpher. A group of Earth cadets stepped out, looking clumsy and unsure. The light gravity threw off their balance. Their movements were exaggerated, almost cartoonish. And waiting to greet them was Thren, now wearing the uniform of a training instructor. Mara stood beside him, arms crossed and smiling. "Welcome to Zelpher," Thren said. "We've prepared a simple course for you. Nothing too difficult." The Earth cadets nodded, trying not to float as they walked. "Just a light swim," Mara added with a wink, "through one of our deepest floating canyons." As the Earth cadets exchanged confused glances, the Zelfarian instructors turned and led the way. A new chapter was beginning, one built on shared respect, hard lessons, and Dod. The understanding that strength takes many forms etched not only in muscle, but in memory. Asterisk.